Well, let me begin by saying that this is a very momentous day in the life of this university, when the history of this place is written again, updated. Ian Chubb is going to be seen as a towering figure right up there in terms of the contribution he's made with the great founding fathers of this institution, Coombs, Crawford. The legacy has just been astonishing in terms of the growth and the revitalisation of the institution over the last decade. And among all the university leaders that I've had experience of anywhere in the world, I can say with absolute frankness and absolute confidence that Ian Chubb is as good as it gets. He's going to be a very hard act to follow. I think one of the council members put it best this morning when Chubb announced his resignation. He said, what you've done to the ANU is to create an environment in which it's recapitalised, it's been rebuilt, it's been re-philosophised, and it's been re-energised. That's a pretty neat encapsulation of really a quite extraordinary achievement. The nuts and bolts of that achievement are set out in the back page of the media release. I hope some of the quality of it is communicated about what I've tried to say on the front pages, but this really is a remarkable legacy for this institution, and it's one that saddens us all to see Ian go, but it's perfectly well understood that after 10 years in the job that he should feel it's time to move on. We understand that, we respect that, and the process will shortly commence, of course, of finding a successor. But it's not going to be easy to find someone of quite extraordinary qualities of intellect, creativity, imagination, discipline and general competence that's been brought to this campus. I've been very proud to be associated with it in my limited time here so far as Chancellor, and I really do respect that legacy, as we all do, and congratulate Ian upon it. So over to you to explain yourself, what you've achieved in the past, and open yourself up to questions. Ian.
Well, thanks, Chancellor. As you'd imagine, I anticipated facing this day with mixed emotions, and I have mixed emotions. It's been an immense privilege to be the Vice-Chancellor of this institution, but particularly it's been a privilege to be the Vice-Chancellor of the people of this institution, the staff and the students that make it what it is. And I think it's easy to think that you're separated from it. I've tried never to do that. I've tried always to be part of it and part of them, and I approached the task with an immense sense of privilege. I think it's just about one of the best jobs going around. Certainly it's the best job in Australian higher education in my view, and I was proud to be selected when I was 10 years ago. I'm leave with a great sense of privilege, a large number of friends, and I feel that there are people who are associated with the ANU, and the regard for the ANU around the world really is something of which I'm also proud and feel privileged to be able to be part of. So all in all, it's a sad day, but it's also a day when I just recognise how lucky I have been to be able to be part of this place and work with the people that I've been able to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you for questions.
Professor Chubb.
For my benefit, could you introduce yourself, please?
David McLennan from the Canberra Times.
Great.
Professor Chubb, how long have you been thinking about this, and why have you made the decision now that it's time to move on?
Well, I talked to the Chancellor about it actually before he'd started to be Chancellor, so I talked to his predecessor about it because I'm in my 67th year. In 12 months' time I'll be halfway through my 68th year, and I wanted to sit back and think about some other things that I wanted to do. Not full-time employment, I've not got another job or anything. I want to retire, but I want to be able to manage my time. I want to be able to do things that are interesting to me while I'm healthy enough to be able to pursue them with some vigour and energy. And sooner or later you have to make the decision. And I thought halfway through my 68th year was probably a good time to make that decision. All the bits of me still work, from the neck up and the neck down. So I will be able to do things and participate in issues of significance. I think one of the things you get a bit addicted to when you're Vice-Chancellor of the ANU is that you can speak on issues of significance and substance with regard to higher education, universities, particularly education more generally, and you get the opportunity to contribute to the influencing of the outcomes, and I've always enjoyed that as part of it. I imagine I'll continue to do that sort of thing, but the time is right.
Professor Chubb, Ben Listen from the ABC. Just curious, you've made a lot of mention over your years at the ANU of merit-based funding for higher education. Do you feel like you've made significant progress with that, and do you feel like that won't be left as unfinished business for you?
No, it will be unfinished business. I think that my personal view is that the structure of our sector is wrong. That we do need to be able to adjust the relationships between institutions and how those institutions are supported and supported for what they do, supported well for what they do, but they will do different things. They will achieve different outcomes. They will operate at a different level of, say, international benchmark and so on. And unless we support our best, we won't be able to draw along the rest. And we're in a highly competitive international market, and where you have massive investment in the best universities in most of the countries in our region and in Europe, then we can't afford to be as even-handed as we have always been. And I think that bullet is going to have to be bitten at some point. It's immensely political, of course. The consequences for politicians are much greater than they are for me. I can say it, and it will be difficult to do, but I think it's important for our future.
And as to your own personal involvement in that particular movement, I guess, do you feel like, what sort of progress have you made? And as you say, it will be unfinished business, but do you feel like you made progress?
Well, it's certainly on the agenda. Certainly the relationship between universities is now very much a part of the government's agenda. Minister Carr has talked about hubs and spokes for research, and we ourselves now have about half a dozen bilateral agreements with other Australian universities where we offer each other support in areas where we're maybe not as strong as we would like to be, but they are, or vice versa. And those arrangements, I think, will be an important part of ensuring that able students and staff are able to work to their maximum capacity and capability, but it'll spread it a little bit to ensure that we've got the capacity lifted around Australia. I don't think it would be good for Australia simply to have 3 or 4 universities that are funded like Harvard or Yale and the rest of them funded much lesser. I think we've got to actually see a way of using the best to draw the rest forward so the whole sector moves upwards. And there's a cost to that, but there's certainly a cost to not doing that too. And we have to make sure that the cost and the value of doing it is well expressed and shown to be easily exceeding the cost of not doing it.
Lisa Mosley from Win News. Professor Chubb, what are some of your proudest achievements or greatest moments in your 10 years here at the ANU?
So from a personal point of view, I would say that my proudest achievement, I think, has been basically the human interactions where we've had a good relationship with staff and students for pretty well most of that period. I'm sure if you went and asked every individual on campus right this moment, you would find some people who don't like me because I've made decisions that they mightn't have liked, probably because they had, in their perception, a negative impact on them personally. But I don't think the numbers are so high. I think if you look at how we've managed staffing issues and student issues over the last 10 years, how we've done that in a context of growth, but with some quite difficult periods in between. I mean, we were buying into the ARC when I arrived, which meant we had a cut to our budget that we both had to absorb, but at the same time use the more project funding that came from ARC to supplement back in and so on. So there have been some issues that could have affected very adversely the morale of the place, the morale of staff, academic in general, all the people who make a contribution to this institution and make it what it is, the students who come here and make their contributions. So I think it's the personal and interpersonal relationships that are the thing I will take away and feel most warmly about. Then there are some tangible things like, $500 million worth of new buildings and a few $1 million worth of new equipment and, linkage with our partners in Yale and Berkeley and Oxford and Cambridge and so on, which is now gaining momentum, and we're just sending off 30-odd students to go over to summer schools, and we're getting 30-odd back here from those partners. I mean, all of those things are important. A medical school, which we started up and has graduated its classes now. Revision of the internal structure to make sure that we had our academic strengths focused and accessible to students, as well as maintaining the quality of their research performance. The standing of ANU in international rankings. I mean, all of those things make you proud and pleased. But you realise when you look at those what an immense privilege it's been to be here. And because I couldn't have done a lot of those things without all of the rest of them out there putting their shoulder very firmly to the wheel. And so there's a whole lot of people who have contributed to or enabled the Chancellor to use all those nice adjectives about me. And I appreciate those, but I recognise there are other people who have contributed to those too.
If I can just put a bit more flesh on those adjectives. I mean, any great university has got to be great in three main areas simultaneously. One is research, second is teaching education, thirdly is in terms of community engagement, contribution to the broader national policy debate. ANU is really top of the pops in all three of those respects. And what makes this university really, really distinctive, and I say this as a University of Melbourne graduate and present employee, what makes this really distinctive is, I think, one, the maintenance of ANU's statement as the absolute role gold standard research university, reflecting its origins. It's not only a research university now, of course, but it's certainly maintained that, and that's very much part of the reason for ANU being top of the rankings internationally among Australian universities. Secondly, there is the quality of this place as the national university and what that implies in particular in terms of the contribution to the policy debate. And one achievement that Ian hasn't mentioned that I think really is pretty startling is the announcement just a few weeks ago of the establishment of the new National Policy Institute with all its component elements, the China Centre, the Security College, the Coombs Forum and the upgraded Crawford School. I mean, this creating a Kennedy School kind of an operation here in the heart of the country is a fantastic reinforcement of that outreach role of the university and a fantastic testimony to Ian's lobbying and advocacy skills. And the third thing is the status of this, which makes us really distinctive, I think, the status of the communal character of this university. It's helped by being basically a single campus, but also the policy that Ian has so comprehensively embraced of a very strong residential component and all the work you've done in building residential capacity here, plus the atmosphere that's created. It's something that over and over again people refer to about, the quality of their experience here on this campus. That's what you began by saying was your proudest achievement, and I think we can objectively acknowledge that. That's absolutely right.
So he can say those nice things better than me.
You saw the university through a series of sort of natural disasters as well, the Stromlo Observatory being one of the major ones. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you and obviously overcoming it as well in more recent years?
Well, so it was Stromlo was the bushfires was that whole period, that weekend was immensely traumatising for a lot of people. And I was getting telephone calls telling me what was happening all the time, but we were watching these cinders floating in over the campus, and people had garden hoses sort of putting them out and everything, and you just think, the wrong cinder in the wrong spouting in the wrong building, and you've got real trauma. So I think I, along with most of the ACT, was pretty traumatised that week. But I think that one of the things that we did was we got together very quickly. On the Monday and Tuesday we started to have meetings with affected staff, some of whom had lost their houses, most of whom, with respect to Stromlo, had lost their workplaces, workplaces that they loved and that were part of the Australian heritage, really. And I think the thing that pleased me most was that we rose to the challenge. It would have been easy for people to say, well, I can get a job somewhere else and I'll nick off, or I'll do this or I'll do that. But we didn't do that, none of us. We rose to the challenge, and we're still fighting the challenge because we're still in the courts about the settlement of our insurance claim. But it really brought out the best in a lot of people, and I think including me. I think I probably rose to that in a way that I didn't know I had in me, because I'd never had to do that before. So it made the hailstorm a bit easier. I felt immensely experienced when I saw the damage that was created by that. And of course that closed us down for a little while. It was much more on this campus. But now I sit in Llewellyn Hall, and I think it's a hall and not a bunker. I think it's comfortable to sit in, it's pleasant to sit in. So some good came out of that as well, and we rose to that challenge, and my colleagues. In a way it goes back to what I was saying. I think the spirit of the place was good, and I think that the staff and the students knew that I was in there with them, and my colleagues and the executive were in there with them, and that our job was to get the place back better than it was before, indeed. And so I think those sort of natural disasters let you see things in yourself that you would never otherwise discover, and that was true for me as it was for a lot of other people.
Professor Chubb, we've heard about some of your achievements so far, but you've still got another 12 months to go, and I suspect there's a few things you'd like to get done in that time. Can you tell us what you'd like to achieve in that last bit?
Well, I would like to achieve the understanding of all my colleagues that the foot will not be taken off the pedal, that this is not going to be me doing a lap of honour and I have enough dinners and things like that as it is without having more to celebrate this. So we've got some important things to do. We've got to finish off the public policy precinct and all the work behind that the Chancellor just referred to. We have our first real compacts negotiations with the Commonwealth later this year, which will be important for the ANU, because if you look at some of the Prime Minister's speeches, you'll see in there he says that this is what he was then talking about, the public policy precinct, is in addition to the compact discussions which will rectify some of the previous funding anomalies. And I'll be talking to the department about how we might do that. I think so in terms of big items, they're the two biggest ones that face us this year. What happens after that will depend to some extent on the timing of the announcement of my replacement and when they'll be able to take up their position. But I anticipate that I'll be involved with or engaged in their transition to this institution, because I don't know what it looks like to you guys from the outside, but I can tell you on the inside it's pretty complicated, pretty precious institution, and a lot of its complication leads to its preciousness. So we've got to sort of cope with that complication and complexity, and to come in cold from outside would give somebody a surprise, as it did me. So I think the transition is the next thing that I'd be looking at. But we have decisions to make with respect to next year's budgets, the performance, which is now more tightly linked to performance than it has been. And so all of that's this year, but it will have implications for next year and subsequent years. And then the transition.
Professor, you've signed on until 2012, but you're
Yeah.
finishing up 1 year early. Is there a particular reason for that? And I presume you won't be paid for that final year?
This is not an Australian corporation where we pay people masses to leave early. No, I won't be paid. And indeed, I hadn't thought of asking for that actually.
Just as well.
That's right. So what was the first part of the
No,
question?
why you've decided to finish up a year early?
Well, so the reality is, I thought to myself in January, I've got 3 years to go. I'm 67. I feel pretty fit. But do I want to wake up in January 2012 saying I've got 1 year to go? And by which time I'll be whatever, 69 or something. Well, yeah, 69. It's going on 69. And I just thought that there comes a time in your life, I mean, this has been a very relentless, pressured job. I think it's enjoyable. Like all these things, you only remember the high points and everything else. But it's been pretty full on for 10 years, 10 and a half years by the time I go. And I just thought to myself, talking to my wife and my children, that it really is time where I actually sit back and think about what are the things you want to do while you're still able to do them. And I'm not going to run a marathon or ride a bicycle to Melbourne like some people do. But I can't think of anybody who would do that. But there are things I'd just like to do, and I'd like to wake up in the morning and not have to shave. I'd like to think, you know, somebody's just made a comment about differential funding in higher education. I think they're right or they're wrong, and, you know, write a piece or support them or do whatever it is. Those sort of things that will really give you the time to sit back, think, reflect, and do things that interest you. And you know, hopefully see the Sydney Swannies win another premiership or two. And as long as they beat Hawthorn, I don't care. So, I mean, all of those little things that will make life a little bit different. And then I expect that I'll probably do other bits and pieces of work, but I don't anticipate doing a lot from the inside of a university. I think my 16 years, 17 years as a Vice-Chancellor, that's a long time at the pointy end.
Professor Chubb, are you planning to keep any ties at all with the ANU, or is it going to be a clean break? And can you tell us a little bit more about some of those ways you're going to still try to influence public policy?
Well, I don't want to make it sound as though we set up a public policy precinct to look after me in my retirement, but it is an area that interests me. I do actually have a fascination with the way evidence is brought to bear to inform public policy. Now, I know a lot about education and a bit about science and a bit about research and so on, and I'm a keen observer of other areas, but wouldn't be competent to comment on them. But I do think that a sector like ours does need people who have the time to sit back, reflect, and begin to help try to position future public policy based on their knowledge and the capacity to do the research they need to do. So I would anticipate doing that. My predecessor has a couple of connections with the ANU. He's been meticulous in keeping out of my way. I would probably end up having a couple of connections with the ANU, but I will be meticulous in keeping out of the way of my successor. I don't think it would be in any way useful for that person to see me looming in the background or some people thinking that they can influence that person, my successor, by getting at that person through me. So I want to keep out of the way, but I want to connect with some of my academic colleagues and be stimulated by the discussions you can have around a cup of coffee or a book or a glass of wine or whatever it might be, and contribute in that way.
Professor Evans, could you tell us a little bit about the search? Are we going to be looking internationally for a replacement? And what in particular are you going to be looking for in your replacement for Professor Chubb?
Pardon me, just before you answer that,
Oh,
can
don't worry.
you just move the mic?
That's good.
We're all good.
The search will start almost immediately because we're going to do, as you would expect, a very comprehensive exercise. Yes, it will reach internationally. Certainly for Australians, we'll be looking at who've achieved positions of distinction and high experience abroad, of which there are likely to be more than a few, I suspect, will be interested in coming back. I think given this university status as a national university and with the close connections with Commonwealth and Commonwealth public policy and so on, perhaps there's a slightly greater disposition than would be the case for other Australian universities to look for someone with close experience, knowledge, understanding of the Australian political and educational culture. But, you know, all of that is open. The task is to get the most outstanding candidate. And we'll have a completely open mind about who that is at this stage. There's certainly no favourites at this stage. In terms of criteria, well, we've had the beginnings of a discussion on that in Council this morning, and this will be much refined as time goes on. But from my personal point of view, there are 4 boxes that have got to be ticked for this job. One is the formal qualifications and experience in higher education, academic respect, credibility, and runs on the board in terms of some kind of comparable executive experience. That's very easily objectively ascertainable. It's just a matter of working out what you want and finding it. But then there are 3 other less tangible boxes, but which are really of absolute importance. The second one is values. What values does that person have in terms of commitment to excellence, commitment to equity, and the balance between them, and other things as well. This sets the tone tremendously for the style that you bring to an outfit like this. The third box, which is different again, is judgment. What qualities of judgment? And it's one thing to have the resume, but how is the person likely to react in difficult industrial relations situations, highly sensitive policy issues that arise? I mean, will the right judgment calls be made? And that's something that's often very difficult to anticipate when people get into these high-level, high-stress situations, but it's a critical thing to get right. And the final question is, final box is really just what might be described as personality. I mean, capacity to actually persuade, to communicate, to advocate effectively, both within the internal university constituency, within the wider education public constituency, and of course with the government, with which this university has such a strong and long-standing relationship. You can have, again, all the formal resume, you can have all the decent values, you can have all the judgmental qualities, but if you can't communicate them effectively and persuasively, then you're not going to be the kind of person that's going to be right for this job. So that's just a first rough stab at this. I mean, in any given list of selection criteria, there's 10 or a dozen dot points of all of a fairly familiar kind, but this is what I'll be looking for, and I've no doubt that we'll have some really, really outstanding calibre candidates for this. I mean, as you always do for the group of 8, the leading Australian universities, but with ANU, I think in particular, with our status as the acknowledged leading Australian university, it shouldn't be too hard to find a pretty good field to finally choose from, which I hope we'll be in a position to do before the end of this year. I mean, the idea is to move the process quickly and manage and give us plenty of time to manage the transition.
And you also mentioned that Professor Chubb was going to be up there with some of the founding fathers. Does that mean we're going to see a building named after him?
We already had a safe company named after him, but
well, I do understand the students call the accommodation built out of containers over the back chubby holes. So maybe I've already got it.
Look, he's got enough grandeur complexes at the moment. We don't want to give him an edifice complex as well, but in due course I think it might just be a possibility. But there we go. Any other questions? If not, thank you all very much for coming, and thank you, Ian, for a wonderful contribution.
Thanks, Gareth.